Hello and welcome to the NextPowerUp review summary of Contract. This is a game by a guy called Sylvian Huben and it's made in Game Maker. This is a side-scrolling shooter very much like Hitman but in 8-bit, but a hell of a lot more simplistic. Just quite basic in all of the way it does things. There's a reasonable amount of nice little systems in this, but they're all reasonably well developed and quite simplistic. But equally, on the other side, there are a couple of bugs. So the first thing I want to jump into is the core gameplay. It's relatively easy to pick up in the early game, but then once you get into the late game, it is quite complex. Now, the game is only 2 hours long and only has 20 levels, I believe. So it is quite short by all standards. It's relatively cheap, but it is very short. I mean, over the 20 levels, depending on how bad or good you are, depending on how frustrated you get and you come back later, this may take anywhere between an hour and 2 hours to complete, and there's not a huge amount of replay value in it, although it hasn't stopped me putting 10 hours in it just so I could get the full everything ready for this review. So yeah, it's quite short, but it's actually reasonably decent at this length, and the developer has said that there will be some free content to come for those that bought it, just to add some additional gameplay value to the time. Now, there is a little upgrade system in this game, and there is a negative side to that as well. And it's quite a nice little upgrade system. You've got 4 neat little sections. The first section is a simple sort of visual aesthetic section that's it's just glasses, heat-seeking goggles, and a fedora which you can choose from. They all cost like 40,000 money or whatever, and that's just a nice little bit of personalization. The second bit is armor. You can get light, medium, and heavy armor for your main chest. Now, all of these upgrades will affect 3 stats: your concealment, your speed, and your health. Now, obviously, the no armor will make you nice and fast and concealed, whereas the light, heavy, medium armor will make you slower, make you easier to see, but it will give you more health. And then in contrast, you've got like the lower part. You've got legs, light trousers, normal trousers, and armored trousers. Obviously, these will affect those stats in a different way as well. And then you've got the tie, which is just a nice little alternative way of doing upgrades, where different color ties will give you bonuses to each of those stats. Now, one of the things I want to quickly jump into is that, yes, you have these different stats and you have health, except I don't currently understand how the health system works in this game. So basically, you have these little stats and it'll have a bigger bar than the other depending on what stuff you've got equipped, except when you're actually in the game, there is no view of your health at all, so you don't really know. Now, in this game, you can one-shot some of the lower end enemies, and when an enemy dies, you'll see blood, and that's your how you know that they're dead or that you've successfully hit them. Whereas when they shoot you, there's a bit of blood, but then there's no counter to tell you only have this much health left. Or I don't actually know how the health system works, basically. So I don't know whether they hit you and you're gonna just sit and regenerate over time, whether the health amount is reset when you move up and down level floors on a level. I don't know if you have a whole health pool and that gets affected depending on where any. I don't know anything about it, and it really needs a health meter or some kind of UI addition to tell the player, hey, you have this much health, or hey, you can take this many hits, or this is going to happen when. And that's a big sort of up in the air thing with this game, is that you don't know when you're going to die, basically, and you don't really have much control over whether you're going to die or not, other than try not to get hit, which, because there's no cover, you're almost certainly going to get hit at some point. Now, the soundtrack for this is very nicely matched with the storyline. The storyline is you're this ex-cop who's trying to get his brother, and he's being blackmailed into doing these assassination contracts in order to free his brother. And throughout the game, you slowly get the impression that the protagonist that you are playing is a little bit crazy. Quite crazy, in fact, because he eventually starts enjoying doing the contracts and becomes quite good and looks forward to the next ones. And the soundtrack reflects that slight insanity. It is a bit weird, but I think when the first time I listened to it, I thought, oh, this is odd. But over time, it did grow on me, and it does match the content and the storyline of the title quite well. So I think they've made a reasonably decent jump into that. Enemy variance is quite simple. You've got the no armored guys take one shot, slightly armored guys take a few shots, heavily armored guys that have machine guns, who take numerous shots and sometimes are indestructible, and you've got dogs who also can be one-shotted, but it's very difficult to melee. Now, a lot of the negative I have with this game is the bugs. There are a lot of bugs, quite a number of bugs. They're not necessarily game-breaking bugs, but they're frequent enough to annoy you significantly while you're playing through the game. So the game is quite short, in just a couple of hours. There's no video or audio option, so I had to tab out into the Windows sound mixer in order to lower the volume. I could change the resolution. It just stuck with whatever resolution was native on my monitor at the time, but luckily I have two, so I could do the benchmarks fine, and I could just change it in Windows display settings anyway. But there are a lot of bugs as well. Now, the AI bugs include the heavy guys. After a short period of shooting, they'll start walking towards you to melee you, and for some reason during this period you can't kill them. It's impossible. But if you go up a floor in a level, then you go down a floor, they've disappeared. Sometimes when you shoot enemies, they'll fall on the floor and they'll like start crawling, and you can execute them Hitman style in the head or whatever to kill them, finish them off. But occasionally this animation bugs or something, I don't know, because then their body just starts sliding across the floor, and no matter what you do, nothing happens, and they just sort of slide until eventually they just disappear past the wall. So that's a little bit weird. And a similar sort of thing happens with the dogs, except it happens when the dogs are alive. So they'll suddenly start running towards you and you'll shoot at them, and if you miss, then they'll sort of just turn around and go the other way. And I always shoot while I'm crouched. So what happens is I'm crouched, I'll shoot, I'll miss, and then they'll turn around and just float off behind a wall. And then as soon as I leave crouching, suddenly I'm killed by a dog that's invisible somewhere, and it's just... There's a lot of these little bugs. And the other thing is with the upgrade system. It's a nice little upgrade system, but some of the buttons don't buy what you think they're going to buy. When you press none, you're not refunded. And also with the money you earn in the upgrade system, when you the game has on the score screen that I've got a print screen shown in the review. It has kills and stealth kills. Stealth kills aren't being counted. Stealth kills are supposed to give you more money, except for some reason, I don't know if they are giving me more money, but they're not being counted at the moment, and I don't... That's another bug that's there. My main issue with the game is the bugs and the player feedback. Now, the main thing about player feedback is you don't ever notice it in games. Such as when you're running around in a first-person shooter and you pick up ammo, you'll hear that noise. Now, lots of players don't notice it because it's existed for decades, basically. Or when you shoot someone, they'll jitter back, or you'll see a bit of blood, or you'll hear the noise of it hitting them. Whereas in this title, there's none of that. When you move over a dead enemy, it actually gives you ammo. Now, I didn't know this until about halfway through the game, when I ran out of ammo one time, ran over a guy, and suddenly saw this random number in the top right increase. And I thought, oh, what happens if I shoot and it decreased? And I thought, oh, that's the ammo. Would have been nice to know that in the first place. And also would have been nice to know that when you go over an enemy's dead body, you pick up ammo. Now, that can be done by simply walking over it and making a or whatever noise when you pick up the ammo, so you know that that's happened. And also, when you're shooting an enemy, you don't know if you've hit them or not because nothing happens. There's no audio cue and there's no visual cue. The only visual cue is when you kill them because there's blood all over the wall, which is a nice cue. There's lots of blood and it's very satisfying. But it would be nice to have some sort of audio cue when you hit someone, and maybe a visual one as well, just a few blood splatters, and also that ammo thing. The other thing is the sort of bizarre interaction system in the game. The levels are massive. They're quite complex. They're nice and neatly and quite varied. And you sort of have to keep them in your head, and you'd be quite surprised at how well you can keep layouts of a level in your head, despite the fact you may have only just seen it. But there's bits in the level where you can't get to certain parts of the level because they're locked behind these coded doors. Now, you can find these terminals around a level which you'll have to find in order to unlock these doors. But if you unlock the door via the terminal first, you'll set off an alarm which supposedly puts the enemies in a state of alert. Except I don't really understand how this works, because I've noticed no different about the state of alert. But then there's this other thing where you can shut down the power to the whole building, and then it will dim the lights, and when you then use the terminal, it won't set off the alarm, and it won't put the enemies in a state of alert, except there's no difference. I've tried both things, and neither of them seem to make much difference. And when you turn off the power, the lights dim, except what confuses me is that there doesn't seem to be any visual cue that your concealment has gone up now that the lights are dimmed. And so I feel like there's a lot of these systems which might have been put in place, might have been developed, but may not necessarily be working because there might be a bug or something, or whether it's just a simple fact of, hey, this is just something that happens and it's not necessarily going to happen. It just makes you think that it's going to happen. Although the alarm thing is mentioned in the game, where if you turn off the power, then enemies won't be alarmed. I mean, I've played the game for 10 hours. I mean, I've played it like 6 or 7 times over by now, and I don't really notice much of a difference between setting off an alarm and turning off the power and then unlocking doors. So there's just not enough visual or audio feedback to the player to tell them that these things are happening. So I know I've been going on about the negatives for quite a long while, but it is at its core. I mean, all of these negatives are very small issues that are very easily solved. They're just small little bugs. It's a single developer. When you're QAing as a single developer and you don't have hundreds, if not thousands, of people playing the game for you, then it's quite difficult to uncover bugs in your own work. And I'm well aware of not finding errors in my own work because I'm the only one that checks it. So I can understand why there's quite a number of bugs that haven't necessarily been uncovered, but I have spoken to the developer and he has said that most of them are pretty easy to fix and can be done within a week or so. So a lot of these things will be solved. It's just going to be a case of finding out where variables are wrong or where conditions are wrong somewhere else and just tweaking them until they work. It is at its core a very simple game, easy to jump into, quite challenging the end game, quite entertaining for an hour or two, and all of the core simple basics are just nice and simple and easy. It feels pretty good and it feels relatively satisfying. Even the melee option is pretty good, except when bugs happen and then the melee isn't possible. But you know, it is a pretty reasonable title. It's not quite Not a Hero. It's not quite Gunpoint. It's not as complex or as ridiculous or as funny as any of those titles. But it is, you know, above average. It's certainly not any of the that 8-bit Steam trash we basically see released every day of the week on the Steam upcoming list. So it is a lot better than that, and with the free content and with the eventual bug fixes, it is only going to get better. But it's just an average game at this point, so I wouldn't say go out and buy this game immediately. It's excellent fun and you need to play it like Not a Hero. That is a fantastic, awesome title, but it is entertaining and it's a decent game at a relatively decent price. So that's it for our review of Contract. Next week, I'm still not entirely sure what the review for next week is going to be. I have 2 or 3 games which I'm supposedly getting codes for, which all release either the end of this week or next week on review day, but I haven't received any of those codes yet, so I'm not 100% sure what that is or when it's going to be. But something will be put up on Thursday. It's either going to be Homeworld, Deserts of Kurak, Dragon's Dogma, which I've already got, I believe, but I'd rather do Homeworld, or I can't remember what the other title is actually at the moment. It'll come back to me and I'll mention that on our Next Week in Gaming on Saturday. So hopefully you've enjoyed this review, a little bit different to the normal games we do, and I'll see you guys next week.